Hey guys, how's it going? So we are going to do we're going to look at Socrates and his trial. And I was about to say we're going to do a quick video. I don't know how quick it's going to be. I'm going to try to move at a good pace. I could talk about this dialogue about Socrates for hours and hours, but you don't want to sit and listen to me for hours and hours. So I'm going to walk through some of the main points that I want to make sure that we get from this. And one of the main things that we're looking at in this worldview class is that the definition of worldview has to do with our presuppositions about reality. And we're trying to examine whether our presuppositions really line up with reality or not. And we're doing it in this context of thinking, the process of thinking, certain thoughts, historical, important philosophical, theological thoughts, and then important thinkers from the past. And this dialogue of Socrates' apology, his trial, really encompasses all of those things. And so we're going to, as we go through this, want to look at this. I put up a chart here. There's a lot of stuff on that chart, but I just want to walk through and give us a big picture of what we need to take away from this. Okay, so again, remember this is his trial, and the apology, and you guys probably know this, apology doesn't mean like I'm sorry. It is more of a defense. And it is giving the reasons why you've done what you've done, explaining what you've done and why you did it. And in his opening remarks, he is going to deal with some old charges against him. And these are things that have been, around forever. These are the reasons people don't like him. And, what's one of the things he's saying is that the reason I'm on trial here isn't because I've done anything specifically wrong. It's because people are really, they just don't like me very much. And there's a good reason why people don't like Socrates very much. And he traces back because it starts when I was told that I was the wisest person in the world. He's like, I'm not the wisest person. I know I'm not the wisest person in the world because I'm not very wise. And he's going to go and he's going to try and find people who are wise. And he's going to, try to learn from them. It's like, well, if I'm wise, then these people must be really wise or whatever. And so I'm going to try and learn from them really what wisdom is. And he finds out that the only reason the advantage he has over these wise people, politicians, artists, all that kind of stuff, is that he understands that he doesn't have wisdom, right? So he's basically saying, I'm wise because I know that I am not wise. And he goes to politicians, artists, and the more he tries to find this, and so what he does, we know part of the Socratic method is that you go and you ask questions of people, and we saw this in Euthyphro, right? That, you think you know what, piety is. Well, how would you define it? And again, as Euthyphro tries to define it, Socrates just keeps throwing these questions at him, and he just, you could tell how people are going to be annoyed with this, right? And we've seen these people. We know these people in life, the people who don't accept any answer. They just keep asking questions constantly, right? My wife has accused me of being like that at times, and she might be right, okay? And so basically, and one of the best quotes in there is in here, systematically, I realized to my sorrow and alarm that I was getting unpopular. Well, of course you were, because you just kept sort of annoying people constantly, right? And so that's the first part, just kind of saying, all right, the whole reason I'm here is because people don't like me because I ask too many questions. And then he starts dealing with the specific questions, the specific charges, which are that he is corrupting the youth and denying the gods. All right. And so this section of the dialogue, he is going back and forth with Miletus, who is, we could think of him as like maybe the district attorney. He's the guy who's prosecuting him, bringing these charges against him, Miletus. And one of the things that happens in this, usually most of the times when people read the Apology, they're a little frustrated with Socrates because he doesn't really mount much of a defense against himself. He sort of just bypasses what could be some killer arguments, but he never does. He just kind of makes some general statements about things. And one of the main things that he does is he's going to make a couple arguments. I put this in the handout, and I wanted to touch on this because we have been interested in the thinking process, and we've looked at some arguments and logic and how these unfold. And two of the ways to make an argument are deductive and inductive. Now, deductive takes general principles and then it tries to make a specific instance, like this is absolutely true. Inductive goes the other way. It takes a bunch of specific instances and then it tries to make a general principle from them. And what's interesting in this is that we see Socrates using both of these strategies at different times. And these have to do with the accusation that he is corrupting the youth. All right. And so he gets Miletus to, he asks Miletus, okay, so you say I corrupt the youth. All right. Are there people who, I guess the opposite of corrupting would be helping, right? So are there people who help the youth? Oh, yeah. Who? Well, the jurors here, which is a smart move to say, right? Yeah, the jurors do. How about other people? Oh, yeah, the parents do, the shopkeepers do, the butchers, the teachers do, all this kind of stuff. And he gets basically what he's going to do is he's going to have Miletus say that everybody is helping the youth, and the only person that corrupts the youth is Socrates. Okay, so he gets him to sort of admit that, like 99% of the population, everybody helps the youth, but there's only one person that corrupts the youth. Okay, so he's going to unfold that general principle, and he goes, does that really hold up? And so he's going to say, well, okay, think of horses, right? For me, like if I had a horse, I have no idea what to do with it. Like, do you feed it oats or so? I didn't know, like, is oats a thing? I don't know what horses eat. I don't know where to keep him. Put him in my backyard, but he'd probably escape because my fences are down because of a big ice storm that we had. I don't know if you guys heard about that, but anyway, like if I had a horse, that poor thing would probably be dead in a week because I don't know how to take care of it. Like I think they have shoes, like horseshoes is a thing, right? People put up, and like, how do you put those on a horse? Do they need them? Do they not? I have no idea, right? And so what he's saying is that most of the people will ride a horse forever and they're not going to take care of it. And so you need like a person who understands horses, which there's very few of those, right? And you can think of maybe your car, like we all drive cars, put gas in it, maybe put oil every once in a while, have the tires rotated, maybe, I don't know. But when something goes wrong with the car, we probably just drive it to death and don't know what to do with it. But there are very few people. There's a few mechanics out there who know how to improve it. And so he says that, and that as that general principle, right? Like, so he starts with these specific instances, horses, most people hurt, all these sorts of things. So he makes his general principles. And he says, therefore, it's unlikely that only Socrates is the only one who's going to corrupt them, right? And again, this is an inductive argument because he takes those specifics, maybe about horses as an analogy, and he makes this general principle. Well, it's very unlikely then that Socrates is going to be the only person that corrupts the youth, right? Does he prove anything with that? Not really. All he does is sort of raise suspicion. Okay, then he's going to take this and he's going to do a deductive argument. And a deductive argument, again, he's going to take some general ideas, you connect them, and then you make a very specific certain conclusion, like the famous one is that all men are mortal. Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal, right? And so you've taken some general principles and you've made it, if those are true, then the conclusion has to be true, right? And so he's going to say, for the first premise is that corruption makes things bad, right? No one wants bad situations, and if you can buy into those, yeah, okay, that's true. Corruption makes things bad. Secondly, no one wants bad things. Conclusion, therefore, no one would intentionally encourage corruption. All right, now the key, and I put this in yellow, is the intentional thing there, because what Socrates is doing is he's not saying I didn't corrupt the youth, but he's saying if I did corrupt the youth, I didn't do it intentionally because like I would not intentionally make my life worse, right? Like I am not going to do something that's going to lead to a horrible situation, right? Like I'm not going to, ram something through my roof so rain comes through, right? Unintentionally, I might not take care of my roof. I might not notice when something's bad with the roof, and then something bad will happen. But I didn't intentionally do that, right? And so the only thing that Socrates, even if this logic holds up, is that he didn't intentionally corrupt the youth. He's not saying he didn't corrupt them. He's just saying I didn't know it knowingly, and you should be correcting me, like take me aside and go, dude, you're corrupting the youth. Stop it, rather than throw me in jail, right? And, he also says, hey, if I'm corrupting youth, they don't seem to mind. They're all older now and they would have realized they were corrupted and they would bring charges, but they're all like my friends still. So, anyway, all right, so he's found guilty. And then he's asked, what do you suggest is a proper sentence? And this is just a beautiful section. I just think this is so wonderful. It's like, okay, what should we do with you? And he's like, well, okay, I did all this, whatever I did. You should probably, fly me to Maui, put me up in a resort, just feed me the best food possible for weeks and weeks and weeks. And, let me just lounge around on the beach and hang out, read books, talk to people. You owe me amazing things because I've done such amazing things, right? And so since I made everything great, you should reward me, right? Of course, they're not going to buy this. And this is where we get one of the most famous quotes from Socrates. It is the greatest good for a man to discuss virtue every day and those other things about which you hear me conversing and testing myself and others. And this is probably the most famous quote of not only Socrates, not only this dialogue, but definitely all of Socrates, right? Is that the unexamined life is not worth living. And that is so true. We could talk for hours about that also, is that never just assume about life, about reality. You have to examine your life. You have to look into your life. You need to think about who you are, where you're going, all of those things. And so the unexamined life is not worth living. And that, again, that's what we're trying to do in Worldview. We're trying to examine our lives. And so here we have the closing statements. And this is super interesting. And again, I wish we had tons of time to cover this, but we really don't. But he's saying essentially that, you're charging me, you're sentencing me to die. Fine. That's great. It's like, because death is like, it's either where you just kind of fade, you just go to sleep and you never wake up again and you just go into oblivion. That's fine. I just take a really long nap. That's great. Or maybe death is, I've heard this also, that maybe death is where you go to meet those who've died before you, like Homer and all these people, but not Simpson, but the other Homer. Maybe it's all these famous, the people who've gone through life before you and now they're in this place of wherever they are. It's like, that's awesome too, because then I can talk to these people. That'd be cool. So in other words, either way, I'm fine. Like, death is fine. And this is really interesting because probably Socrates, he's writing, almost 500 years before Paul. But we see a lot of phrases when you read Paul that are very similar to what Socrates is saying, like in Philippians 1. For me to live as Christ and die as gain. And then he's like, I can do either of these things. We see a very similar attitude to what Socrates says here. And I think it's very likely that, Paul had read a lot of Socrates, and in Philippians, he's bringing out a very similar argument than people would have known about in the Apology, right? And so he is just saying, okay, so if I'm going to die, fine. That's okay. Let me die. And, it's ultimately the people who accuse him of death, sentence him to death, are left like, okay, well, we didn't really punish him because he's not very upset about this. And they are forced to really think about what they did in accusing him. Okay. All right. Massively oversimplified. All right. So here are a few challenges from this dialogue. The first is to be curious. So, what is our takeaway? It's to be curious. And remember, back to Euthyphro, the biggest problem with Euthyphro was that he thought he knew. He thought he knew. He was so certain that he knew the truth that he wasn't being curious. He wasn't questioning, like, I think I'm doing the right thing by accusing my father. of murder. But he doesn't even have a pause. It isn't like, maybe I should just think about this for a second, right? And so this brings to mind, we talked about this, or there was a previous video about this, naive realism, this idea that you know you are right and you know the other person is wrong. And because you are so certain of you being right and of them being wrong, you never stop to question, is there another perspective here, right? I mean, the whole question is this a 6 or a 9? I'm not trying to go postmodern on you that there's no absolute truth or whatever, but it really does depend. If I'm standing here, it looks like that, but if you're standing over there, it looks like what you're saying it is, right? And we need to be able to step back a little bit and question whether what we think is true really is true. I love this quote from Walt Whitman: be curious, not judgmental. I think that is so powerful because we are so prone to just judging everything and saying that's good, that's bad, whatever, without just saying, I wonder what's going on here. And do I need to dig deeper into this? So be curious and then be courageous. I think this is one of the biggest lessons to take away from this. And the question is, do you have the courage that Socrates had to stand in front of people and speak truth? I love this quote from Gandhi. Many people, especially ignorant people, want to punish you for speaking the truth, for being correct, for being you. Never apologize for being correct or for what you believe is correct or being years ahead of your time. If you're right and you know it, speak your mind. Speak your mind even if you are a minority of one. The truth is still the truth, right? And so a lot of times we're afraid to speak truth because we might get judged, and we need courage to do this. And then thirdly, be content with your mortality. That sounds really weird, but we need to accept the fact that we are going to die someday. This is a famous Stoic saying, memento mori. In other words, it's always be thoughtful of your death, okay? Not in a morbid way, like I'm going to die in a certain way, but knowing that you're going to die someday kind of puts everything in perspective, doesn't it? It's like, do I really want to spend a whole lot of time stressed out about this thing when it's all going to be over someday anyway, right? I'm going to die someday, and I don't want to look back on my life and say that I wasted it on things that don't matter. And so if you're understanding what the future is, that someday you're going to die, and just be content with saying, okay, I'm going to die. So what does that mean about my life? There's a great quote from Tertullian. He was an early church father. He was alive during a lot of persecution, and Christians were writing to him and said, Tertullian, help us because, we're being persecuted. They're killing us. They're killing our family, doing all this stuff. And, and we can't live in these conditions. And Tertullian just asked this really simple question: must you live? Right? I mean, do you have to live? Like, I don't remember that as being part of the deal. Sometimes you die. Sometimes you die for a cause that you stand up for, right? One of my favorite shows is Band of Brothers, and one of the soldiers in there is Ronald Spears, who was a real guy, and this is a quote from him. And at one point in the show, he's talking to this soldier who's just kind of freaking out. He says he's afraid of everything. He can't move forward, can't do anything. And Spears says this: the only hope you have is to accept the fact that you're already dead. The sooner you accept it, the sooner you'll be able to function as a soldier is supposed to function, without mercy, without compassion, without remorse. All war depends on it. So in other words, you need to accept the fact that you're already dead. And this is very Christian. This is, Jesus says, take up your cross and follow me, right? Taking up your cross, when you think about it in the context of when Jesus was talking about this, is that taking up your cross is the last thing you do. It always defines you for the rest of your life. It's not like you can take up your cross and then put it down for lunch and then pick it back up and then go on, put it down, go on vacation, come back. No, for the rest of your life, which could be another 5 minutes, you are a cross bearer, right? And so this is one of the attitudes that Socrates has that I think we as believers need to embrace, and that is that we need to be courageous enough to say, our lives ultimately don't matter because Christ is the only thing that matters. And that means if we have to do things that are risky, we'll take that risk because we want to advance the gospel, right? So anyway, that's a lot of stuff. I'm going to put up a quiz about the apology, and look forward, and I hope that you were able to get some really cool stuff out of this dialogue. Again, man, we could go for hours and hours. It probably feels like I have already, but some really good stuff in here. And I hope that you will go back and revisit this in the future many times. And there's another challenge for you. All right. Thanks for watching, and I look forward to hearing what you guys think about it.